Hey, welcome to video number 2, listing presentation secrets. So we've done the intro, we've done the video number 1, selling yourself, your team, and your brokerage. Now video number 2, we're going to focus on real estate 101 and market factors. What this really means is we're going to educate our client and set some expectations with regard to, the things that we're going to do to help them list, market, and sell their home. But first, they understand, sort of what happens during this process, what the expectations are. And really, we're spending a lot of time trying to educate them so that we are going to have a favorable outcome as it relates to the price point and helping them to price their home to the market. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. What we're really focused on here is the local market factors and things that we can do, and then the things that we can't do to control their home selling. All right. So the things that are out of our control is, and the things that I say to clients all the time is the market will decide. And, if they have a question regarding why their home's not selling or where they should price it or what the property valuation is, I always say, well, let's see what the market says. Let's see what the market is saying currently about the market, right? And the thing they want to know right away is the market good? Is it bad? Is it up? Is it down? Is it a buyer's market or seller's market? So those are the, things that they're wondering and thinking. It's like, how much is my home going to sell for? What are we going to list it for? And so you don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the details of the market right now. What we're trying to focus on right now is educating them on some of the market factors. But I do have a slide here that just talks about the 2017 market data. So you can put whatever statistics in here that you want that might be appropriate for this specific listing. But I just have a little bit of information in here, and I reference my market report. I do detailed market report, and I send that out on a monthly basis, and I do detailed at the end of the year, especially a very intense and detailed report that helps clients understand. And I will bring that with me to the listing presentation and give them a copy of that. And we might talk through some of that when we're talking about the pricing of their home. Right now, the focus isn't talking about the pricing of their home. Okay, I want to make that clear. You don't want to get sucked down into that yet, all right? I mean, there's going to be a time and a place when we talk about that. If they bring it up and they say, well, yeah, but what do you think our home is worth given the market? You want to say, well, we'll get to that. Can I just give you, can you hold off a second? Let's go through some of these things. I just want to give you a little backdrop about the current market trends. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Would that be all right? And then I kind of dive into it. So usually it's good to ask for permission. You really want to try to get through some of these slides and give them this sort of marketing 101, real estate 101, because this helps to set the stage in their understanding of, properly pricing their home to the market. Okay. So as I say in the notes, this is the beginning of a series of slides I use to educate the client. This is really real estate 101, depending on their background, current knowledge. And the important thing is, because we're going to go into specific pricing later, okay? And you may refer back to these slides and when they ask questions about stuff, but it's good that you've established some of this up front, okay? And just like all free markets, the stock market, oil and gas, there's ups and downs, right? And you can define where we are right now. This, as I'm recording this, it's June of 2018. I would say in my market, we're sort of in this area. Maybe we're closer to euphoria. I'm hopeful that this is going to be a long plateau and that we're not close to this area because we just had an announcement that Vail was going to buy Crested Butte, and that's a big deal. And there's a lot of people that are going crazy, and they're definitely in this euphoria mindset, right? So I got to peel some people down off the ceiling. But it's important to cover this because time to market and realistic expectations about the peak is important. And if you're down here, this sometimes lasts longer, But all markets go up and down, and that's just part of it. But talk about where we are now, and you can talk about the market trends and where you are in your current market state. Okay. Excuse me. So we're gonna, on this slide, there's a lot going on. I talk about asking price versus the percent of buyers who will visit your home. And in my market, you might use these statistics. We've had one transaction of a home that sold at 4.5 million, and I hold my hand up and all my fingers out. There's only been 5 other homes that have sold for over 4 million in my market ever. Okay. So I say, there's definitely some luxury homes in this market that are for sale above that. There's some homes that have been built that are worth way more than that. It's not that it's never going to happen. We just haven't had it happen yet. And the number of buyers in our market at the high price point, very, very small, right? And that's what this pyramid shows. Not a lot of buyers up at the top of the pyramid, tons of buyers at the bottom of the pyramid. So if you think of this as a bell curve, right? You can also talk about the price points of, if your home is kind of in the most desirable price point where the average and median homes are selling, there's a lot more buyers there. If you're sort of on the fringes at the very high price point, or you're priced out of the market because you're the most expensive home on the block, or on the cul-de-sac, or in the neighborhood, then it might be a little bit more challenging to find that perfect buyer. Or if it's a very unique home, we don't have a lot of contemporary homes here, not a ton of contemporary home buyers in the mountains, although that's shifting somewhat. But those homes might be harder to sell. There might be a home that doesn't have great views, and that could be harder to sell. Proximity to amenities can be harder to sell if it's in a beachfront environment, but it's not on the beach. It's like 6 blocks away, and you got to go across a busy street. That's not desirable. If it's right on the beach or right on the intercoastal canal, boy, that'd be really a great place for some people if they had that in their mind for their dream home. Okay. So the point we want to talk about here, I kind of rambled there, but we want to talk about the listing price. So the higher the listing price, the fewer buyers. Okay. The lower the listing price, the more potential buyers. And then the higher the price point, the higher the days on market, the lower the price point, the lower the days on market. Okay. And so that is kind of, then you want to kind of stop and say, does that make sense to you? Okay. Does that make sense? And it's okay to talk about what buyers want. They want the most for the least amount of money. It doesn't matter how much money they have. They still want to get a screaming deal, right? This current time when I have a buyer that tells me that, I'm like, look, there was a time when we had a recession recently, and there were sharks in the water, and you could be a shark back then and buy a lot of real estate. Those times have come and gone. The average discount from asking to selling for single family homes in my market's 3.2%. So, most of the homes are priced to the market. So you're not going to come in and throw a 15% below asking price offer at a seller and expect you may even get a response. They may not even respond. Okay. And if you're in a market that has low inventory, that even more, right? So these are the slides that we're talking about, that kind of stuff. Does this make sense? All right. Absorption rate. I think this is important. All properties compete in the larger market space of other homes that are not exactly similar, but in the same price range, okay? Absorption rate, the number of homes sold, properties sold, divided by the number of months. Example, so if you had a number of homes sold in the past 10 months was 50 divided by 10 months, that means 5 per month are going to sell. Similar properties on the market, if there's 30, absorption rate is 5, that means there's 6 months of inventory. Okay, then you look at the client and say, out of only 5 of the competing 30 properties that sell each month, which ones do you think are going to sell, and how long would you think it might take for your home to sell in this market? And if you're in a big market, right? If you're in a big coastal market or a big mountain market, there might be 100 homes that would be similar. I mean, you can break it down and say, yeah, but this is a unique subdivision or proximity location or whatever. The point here is what we're trying to say is there is, if there's a ton of inventory and not a lot of transactions, it's going to take a longer number of days on market for their property to sell. So this is part of the education. Now, I put these two slides together on this slide, and I say, let's talk about the buyer's perspective, all right? This is a very important slide because this is going to defeat a lot of the things that your seller is thinking about asking you but hasn't asked yet, right? And they're going to say, yeah, but, I bought at the top of the market, or I did a remodel on this home 10 years ago and I spent $100,000 or $500,000, or I had to do all this stuff, and I got this much in it, right? Or when I bought this, this is my mortgage, and this is what I need to net because I need that money for, I want to buy a plane or I want to do something else with it, right? And this is where you have this on the slide for a reason, because if the seller tells you that and you say, well, that doesn't matter, then they get mad at you, right? What you're trying to do is you're like, don't shoot the messenger. This is what the buyer's perspective is. And I always tell sellers, I say, you know what, you get the unique benefit of working with me because I work with a lot of buyers and I understand the mentality of a buyer. And here's their mentality. They don't care what a seller spent. They only care what the current market value is. They don't care what the remodel costs. They only care that, is it up to date and is it a current remodel? If you remodeled it 10 years ago, it might not be the most current finish out that the buyers are going to want. And they may come in here and say, we don't even like this kitchen. We don't like your countertops. We want to get we want marble countertops because those are back in. I mean, the finishes change like women's fashion. So because you thought that the shag carpeting was really cool in the mid 80s, that was out of style after a few years, right? And there's still homes that may have shag carpeting, but that's the point, right? And it's a price war and a beauty contest, and you have to win both. All right. So this is what we're really trying to focus on this slide. And I always stop and I say, do you understand? Does this make sense to you? And if they say no, then you go back over it again, right? Because you want them to understand this for later. And then this is, the cautions of overpricing. And I go right to this slide. Now, here's the deal in most markets, especially with low inventory. I say most times what we're going to find is right when your property goes on the market, there's going to be a flurry of activity. So we really want to make sure we do all the preparation things up until the time when it goes on. And we want to get the professional photography done. We want to declutter, before we get the professional photography done. We want to do all the staging we're going to do if we were going to do that. We want to, everything we need to do to shore up this home, make it look as best as possible, because there's going to be a bunch of these buyers that are sitting on the sidelines that are going to come into the market. And that's this group right here at the very beginning. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks on the market, it's going to get a lot of activity from these buyers, okay? And these buyers are also very intelligent buyers because they've been sitting here watching the market for a long time. And if your home comes on the market and it appeals to them, bam, we might get that contract. We might get, two. We might see a lot of activity and be in a really good position. But if you price it too high, then they're just going to pass, right? And so it's important that we price it to the market, right? Because there's a lot of consequences with not pricing it to the market. And you're really just justifying the other properties that are in your subdivision or in your area, and they're going to sell before you. And it might not appraise. So if the buyer gets a loan, then we're going to end up with this loan negotiate, or this appraisal negotiation where the appraisal comes in well below the contract price, and the buyer says, well, I'm not coming up with that extra money. And you're going to say, well, I agreed to the terms that we agreed to, and I'm not coming down. And, so we're in that. And then, if we had a declining market, the sellers are generally chasing the market down because they're going to say, if you've been in the market for a while, you remember, most sellers in my market during the downturn, they were like, well, the market might be down, but not my house, right? So it took a while. We had double-digit percentages between the asking and the selling price because there was such a disconnect between the sellers wanting to come to terms with the fact that their home was worth so much less than they thought, and they didn't want to sell it for that, and they finally had to relent, and so there's these huge discounts. All right, the buyer math. All right, I wrote an article, and there's a blog post. If you go to my website, chriskopf.com/remodel hyphen, you can see it down here in the notes. Go look at that and read that blog post. But what I'm basically saying is, and you've probably identified this as well, sellers only consider the price of their home. If there's a home that needs a lot of work to be done, the seller doesn't consider all that work that needs to be done. They just think of, well, they're buying my home for $2 million or $3 million. They should be happy. Well, no, they're going to have to spend a lot of money on those projects. And then the seller says, well, yeah, I know, but that's going to only probably cost like $100,000 to do that work, And around numbers in my market, a kitchen is $100,000, a bathroom is $25,000, a master bathroom is probably more, and that's kind of the minimum, $100,000 and up, depending on the finishes, whether they start, really tearing into walls and what they do, but it can get very expensive, right? And what's a buyer thinking? If it's a buyer, they're thinking, oh, holy crap, this is going to, even if you got a bid from a contractor that you trusted, you'd still put 20% on there, wouldn't you? You'd still add an incremental 20% for overage from the contractor, just based on the scope of work that was defined. But what also happens is the what do they call it? The project creep or the remodel creep, where you start out with the kitchen and then you go, well, it really would be nice to have a bay window. Well, maybe instead of a bay window, maybe we bump the whole house out and we add another 10 feet onto the house. Well, how would that happen? Or all the different things. Well, for doing the kitchen, we have to do the bath on the main living area. If we're doing the bath on the main living area, we probably need to do the master bath. And so those things just make the project creep, right? So that goes the remodel cost and then the overage and the fear that it's going to cost more. And then what the seller never factors in is the buyer, there's a general contractor, but the buyer has to make all these decisions and go through all this, process with picking out stuff and making decisions and figuring out what they really want and time and effort of that. That can be fun for a buyer, but it also is their time to remodel the seller's home, right? And the buyer's effort, their time is worth money. And then there's the time they're not able to use the home, right? Because if it's going to take 6 months to do a remodel or one of these projects, what's the carrying cost of a home in your market? Well, I owned a second home in my market, and it was about $50,000 a year to carrying costs for that home. So and I didn't have a super expensive home, so it could be $100,000 or more in carrying costs of the home when the buyer can't even use it because it's occupied by workers, right? They're just trying to get it up to snuff, get it current in the market. So these are all the factors for the buyer. Well, the seller doesn't understand any of that stuff. And so what am I doing on this slide? I'm educating the seller that if there's a lot of projects to be done on their home, that there may be a significant decrease in the selling price based on this buyer math that's going to come into play. Does that make sense? All right, so that's part of what we're trying to educate and why it's important to educate the sellers here. So market factors. The one thing I want to just talk about on this slide that I point to is properties that are priced to market will get a lot more appeal and action and showings and contracts, and ones that are a little bit under market are going to get a lot more, right? If people think there's really good value there, you want to get it sold quicker versus slower. Well, then those are the factors that come into play. And the factors, the location, right? Quality of the home, and that could be a lot of different things. Could be the views, it could be the finish out, it could be it's fully furnished, it could be the layout really is appealing, it could be wow, it's got a 4-car garage. We could turn one of those into a bedroom, or it's got a bonus room that we always wanted, or whatever those things are. The buyer demand, right? What's going on in your market? Is there low inventory, competitive listings? Is there a ton of competitive listings, or hardly any? In my market right now, at the low end, there's hardly any quality single family homes under $1 million. Okay. Financing. Is financing available and easy? We went through kind of the pendulum swung, but these are market factors you want to talk about. In resort markets, there's some condos that are actually condo-tels, right? So getting financing or attractive financing on a condo-tel might be a little more challenging for some buyers, and they might have to use a local bank and pay a higher rate, right? Okay, so this is determining the price of your home. I always say my goal to Mr. Seller is to obtain the highest price, and all things equal, to help you sell your home sooner versus later. Is that okay? I am on the same side. You want to make sure that they know you're working for them, and that all this stuff you've been talking about is just to educate them on the things that you've identified and observed, some of the things that you've seen, and sellers that weren't so happy because they didn't get the home sold in the time frame they wanted because they priced it wrong, and they didn't do the decluttering, and they didn't do the cosmetic things to the home that they needed to do, et cetera, et cetera. So you can talk about those market factors, and in your property valuation report, you're going to talk about similar properties that have sold and other competing properties on the market. And I go into detail in the property valuation masterclass. And then the individual factors. What's the total burden cost to hold the property? This is important. You want to try and get this number, what their carrying cost is, I talked about before. And here's all the things that go into that. Estimated days on market. What's happening in the market today? And what are those burden costs plus the days on market, and what's that going to equal on a year? And then divide that into the days on market to figure out what you can estimate, is their burden cost to sell this home. And if they want to get sold sooner, they're actually going to save some money on their burden costs, right? So that's what's going on this slide. We want to make sure we educate them on that. Okay, so we've gone through slides or videos number intro and 1, selling, and real estate 101. So the next video, we're going to focus on listing, marketing, and selling their home. I'll see you on the next video.